Welcome to the latest edition of the Dynamic Political Centrism podcast, hosted by Alan Steinberg, produced by Dr. Yonatan Yoniyaris the Doc. This week's special guest, Brent Johnson, political reporter for NJ.com and the Star Ledger.
Good evening, and welcome to the voice of Dynamic Political Centrism. I am that voice, Alan Steinberg. With me tonight, as always, is our Hall of Fame producer. I say a lot of things are Hall of Fame, but he really is a Hall of Fame producer and one of the finest talents in the world of high tech and the ability to use it as media. Dr. the Doc, Yonatan Yoniyaris. And we have our favorite guest on tonight. If they were going to give an award to the MVP, most valuable player, or most valuable pundit of the recent election season, Brent Johnson would get it. He's sort of been a combination of Holtani and also Aaron Judge. We have to allow Yankee in every once in a while. So we're delighted to have him, and we like having him as much as possible. I want to start off, this is a post-election review, and I will say this, just to put a setting on it. In retrospect, because I neglected a big factor in analyzing this election, I never thought that Donald Trump would be the factor that he was. He is the reason that Mikey Sherrill, and I'm not taking anything away from her, I'm not a fan of hers, as everyone knows, but he's the reason she got that big landslide, and she knew that also. I'm not discrediting her by saying it, but I never thought that Trump would be the factor that he was. So the fact that I didn't get it is understandable. Other people didn't get it either, because that was the great unknown. How would Trump influence the election? What I don't understand, and when I want to call on Brent for you first, because you may have the best angle on this.
Yep.
It's not so much that she won by a landslide. It's that all of us, including the pollsters, missed it. And I don't know why that is, and I want to get your input, because you were out there every day covering this.
Yeah, this was a really weird one because, obviously she led in most polls, but not by 14, 13 points.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what was odd about it in the sense that, there was always a sense she was in the front. No one was arguing that she had a lead.
Right.
You had Democrats you can't make it up. I had Democrats privately telling me they were worried that I didn't, the thing about them being annoyed at the press, I wasn't making up that people were concerned about her campaign. I was hearing it from numerous Democratic insiders, and I wasn't the only one. Axios, Politico, they all did stories and similar stories. I get the sense that Trump was the major X factor. I wrote a newsletter like 4 weeks before the election where I said, how much is Donald Trump having an effect on the election? And Democrats obviously thought it was going to be a major effect. I had multiple Democratic sources say, I think you guys are underestimating how much of an X factor he is. And I said, okay, that's probably fair. But then Republicans were saying, I don't think it's that big a deal. Trump did better here last year. We're feeling energy on the ground. So this was just, I don't know if the other thing I keep hearing from people is that they underestimated how much the shutdown was having an effect. And obviously Republicans say that Democrats are to blame for the shutdown, but you tend to blame the person in charge.
Right.
You saw that with Chris Christie in the 2017 state shutdown, that even if you wanted to argue that Vinnie Prieto, who was the assembly speaker, was the bigger reason why the government shut down, people blame Chris Christie, especially after he was photographed on the beach.
That was the big thing, the photograph.
Yeah.
So he became a figure of ridicule at that point.
And so the shutdown dragged on, and then it directly affected New Jersey. You had the Gateway Tunnel thing happen, and then you had SNAP happen. And SNAP happened 4 days before the election. And I don't know if that's why you saw such a groundswell of support for Sherrill, but everybody here is kind of questioning what's going on. And you hear Republicans saying that maybe it's that Trump voters didn't come out in an off year. And even if that's true, it doesn't account for how much of a groundswell she had. You have to account that a lot of this was a pushback against Donald Trump. Her campaign will tell you that she was an underestimated candidate and that people liked her more than they let on, or that insiders thought. But, it's probably a combination of things, but definitely there was, exit polls show it. Exit polls show that people didn't, had an adverse reaction to Donald Trump. And, they're also blaming him for the economy. He is trying to push back and saying prices are better under me, but you tend to blame who's at the top. And this seems to be not just because it happened in New Jersey, but also because we saw similar elections in Virginia and elsewhere. So, this will be one we talk about for a while. And it's getting to the point where politics, especially in this divisive age, are becoming harder to gauge.
Well, you just gave a superb analysis. I will add only one thing onto it. I think the real swing vote in New Jersey, and probably in other states too, were voters of color who gave Trump a chance in 2024. Inflation was out of control. They felt, as I do, that he is a racist. I have never denied that. He is a racist. And however, a lot of people of color said, hey, the economy is so bad. Things are so bad. We'll take a chance, even though he's a racist, and we'll vote for him with the understanding that he's going to improve the economy. And the fact that he didn't improve the economy meant that these were the first voters to check out and say, hey, we're not going for him. And I think that was probably a pretty substantial vote.
Yeah, and you see, they both made a big play for voters of color, especially Cheryl recognized that Latino or Hispanic voters were a major voting bloc for her. And both Black voters and Latino voters swung back towards the Democratic side. And I think, I think the fact, I just think a lot of people were stunned and don't quite know what to make of it. And that's a big, that the voters of color are a big reason why, but I still think we're still trying to piece together exactly how everything happened the way it did. But yeah, that's definitely a good point. It's clear she won more Latino and Black leaning areas. And, I know a lot of the thought on Jack's side was that it wasn't that they thought they were going to win the Black or Latino vote. It was the thought that they were going to prevent enough going back to the Democratic side to help him out. And that doesn't seem to be what happened.
I concur with you on that as well. I'm also in a bind, not really in a bind, but in a bit of confusion as to the fact that the Democrats have a much better, vote in terms of mail-in vote. The mail ballot. Now, I've always felt I always vote on election day. It's a ritual for me.
I do too, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're older. What about you, Yoni? Do you vote?
I have to vote on election day. I am a purist.
All right. So the three of us are from the old school. Okay. Although I'm the only one that's old. I'm going to turn 76 years old on Saturday.
Oh, wow. Happy free birthday.
Well, I'm officially the oldest. I am like, I'll use a baseball analogy. I am the mini Minoso of the three of us. Remember him?
Yeah, you played in, I think, what,
White Sox
games or something like that? He played in a
Saturino Orestes Minoso. He was a hell of a player.
Yeah.
And when Bill Veeck died, Bill Veeck was his general manager. I loved Bill Veeck because he was such a character. Yeah. Minnie Minoso went to the funeral in his White Sox uniform. So I am officially the Saturino Orestes Minoso of this program. But anyway, I'm used to voting in person. But there's something to this vote by mail in terms of get out the vote strategy, because I suspect that what this has done is it has basically attracted a lot of people who, if they can vote by mail more conveniently than taking time off from work or whatever to go vote, they'll vote by mail. And I think the Democrats, to their credit, have something there. They've mastered that technique.
Yeah, and you've seen Donald Trump soften on mail-in ballot, mail-in voting a little bit during one of the phone rallies for Chitterelli. He made a comment that, vote however you want. I still think you should vote in person, but however you want to vote. And there's a thought that maybe Republicans still need to come to quicker to learn how to vote earlier. They do favor early in-person voting. And that part of the reason why you saw the turnout be so high is that, it's now easier to vote. You can now vote by mail, vote early in person. So it's not shocking that you've seen the numbers increase in terms of turnout. This is the highest turnout in a gubernatorial election in New Jersey since 1997.
Unbelievably high. I couldn't believe the numbers when I saw them.
It's easier to vote now, which is part of the reason. So, Yeah, and I think Republicans still need. I think they would acknowledge too that they need to do a better job voting by mail. But this is all still relatively new. Meaning, voting by mail has been around for many years, but the idea of widespread voting by mail is relatively new, and voting early in person is new. So, it eventually is going to change. You'll see this change over time.
Well, I tend to think that you're right, and I think that it's a technique getting people to either vote by mail or show up in person is going to be the fashion at some point. Because
I
it does. The Democrats have mastered that. I'll tell you one thing about the South Jersey Democrats. The Norcross organization. They have always been. Some people love George Norcross. Some people hate him. But there's one thing that he has always perfected and has been way ahead of the pack. And that's two things. Number one, in terms of media, people forget this. George Norcross was the first political player in New Jersey to make use of the idea of television in legislative races. I'll get to those races in a minute. But in 1991, the Republicans carried supermajorities in both houses. Florio was very unpopular then, and they carried both houses with veto-proof majorities. But the Democrats won one seat. The one seat they won was in South Jersey in the 6th legislative district. Lee Laskin, whom I knew very well, was the incumbent. And he had a long-standing feud with the Norcross family. He had blocked the appointment of George Norcross's father to the racing commission. So George Norcross, and it was his right to do this, he said, I'm going to get even. And he did. And what he did was he did the first network TV buy in the history of New Jersey legislative races. And what's interesting is how he timed it. That was the year of the greatest World Series I ever saw. The 1990. I always get sports into our show, but it was the 1991 World Series. The Minnesota Vikings, the Minnesota Twins, defeated the Atlanta Braves in extra inning ball, and they did it on a home run in the 6th game by Kirby Puckett. Jack Morris pitched the 7th game, but the thing that Norcross was aware of is that as soon as the game would be over, that's when the political commercials come in normally. You're paying for that rate, and that's when you have the largest audience. So he got commercials on for the late John Adler, and those commercials made John Adler, the late John Adler, the winner in that race. So Norcross perfected that. He also has been a real creative guy in terms of vote by mail and in-person voting. I know another district that is similar. I'm friendly with Kevin McCabe, and right now I think he's the most effective county chair in the state in Middlesex County. And he explained to me they have a whole system where they are aware of who's voting by vote by mail, and they have a pretty good idea by election day as to what kind of cushion they have. So you're right, things change, but this is a change that is, when you think about it, has really benefited the Democrats. I don't think they have lost. I don't know what the story. I'm trying to think what the story was when Chris Christie was elected governor in 2009. They did have vote by mail. Well, actually, it wasn't totally perfected to vote by mail then, because it really became de rigueur when Donald Trump was elected president in 2016. He said that vote by mail would lead to all kinds of corruption, and then he saw how well it worked for Republicans in certain areas, and so he preached the gospel of vote by mail.
Go ahead.
No, I think the question for me is the next intervention that comes in is, are we finally going to have same-day voter registration in New Jersey? I know right now that's being stopped by Scudiari in the Senate. He seems to be very old school in all the wrong ways for me for that. And I think that will be the next thing in terms of increasing turnout as people get more and more engaged, or when they see the shutdown happening, they're like, oh, I'm not registered to vote. I want to have a voice occurring. Going back to 2009, I think we have to treat that with that was a three-way race. Chris Daggett, while only getting 5%, did draw a significant number of independents away that likely would have gone to the re-election of Corzine. Plus, Corzine had his own shutdown, and that pushed a lot of people from education away because he gutted higher education funding in that shutdown.
Well, I think your point is very well taken. What do you think, Brent?
Yeah, I think that's true. That's it's one thing Murphy, I know, wanted to do in when he was still in his very progressive first term. I know it's something he talked about a lot, was having same day voter registration. Scutari's been against it. I don't know if that's something you'll see Mikey Sherrill come in. One question about Sherrill is how progressive a Democrat she's going to be as a governor, whether she'll veer more towards the middle, which is kind of how she ran in the primary. So that's a big question. And that'll be, I mean, I know a lot of younger voters would love to have same day voter registration. So, or younger residents, because they're not voters yet. But yeah, I think you're only going to see. But what's interesting about this, early in-person voting is still relatively new in the state, and it seems to be people are getting more used to it, and mail-in voting too. So we've seen actually the turnout in recent elections. Last year's presidential election in New Jersey was the lowest turnout of any presidential election in the history of New Jersey elections. But this year was a very high turnout. So I guess it really all depends also on how motivated people are to go out in this year. And it seems to be with the shutdown going on that people were motivated to come out this year. So who knows what it's going to be next year? Next year is the congressional midterms. Cory Booker's on the ballot. Who knows what the turnout is going to be next year? This was a big gubernatorial election, an open seat and a tough battle. So, it was very fascinating to see the turnout, what it was this year.
Well, I heard something interesting in regard to how next year's midterms may differ. Now, I heard this. I won't give the person's name. It's a person I don't particularly like, but I think he's a very good political analyst. And he's a very conservative, not just conservative, he's to the right of right wing in the Republican Party. But he's a guy whose political acumen I respect. And I heard him on a video after the election. He seems to feel that next year's election may be better for the Republicans. I don't know if I agree with that, but the reason he feels that way seems to be that the Republican Party nationally really didn't get that involved in this election. They never came through with big money for Jack Ciattarelli. They didn't come with big money in New York or in Virginia. Next year, Republicans may raise a lot of money and come in big time for the congressional races.
Yeah.
They have a lot to lose. So that makes for a good transition right here. I'll come back to the legislature.
Well, there's a thought that Jack got very little money from the RGA 4 years ago.
Nothing practically, yeah.
There was a rumor that I've never confirmed, actually. It's that Chris Christie told them that he didn't think Jack had a big chance.
I would not put that past Chris Christie.
Again, I've only ever heard that. I've heard conjecture on that. I've never had a source directly tell me that's the case.
I don't either, but you and I have been around a long time.
But yeah, that's in the water. That's thought. But then so the thought is they put in more money this time than they did last time. But yeah, there is a thought that Republicans are holding their powder because they are concerned about next year's midterms, and that's the most important thing to them. That the governor's race in New Jersey is still a blue state. They thought that they might have had a shot, but they were willing to swallow it. Next year, they have to keep control of Congress, so they're going to save some of their money.
Well, I think that the Republicans in both Jack Ciattarelli he ran a good campaign.
He did.
But I really have a lot of affection for Jack, so I'm not saying this adversarially to him, and I loved any assistance I could give to him in the campaign, quite frankly. But he made the decision. I can't say I blame him, because in New Jersey, this may change because I think Donald Trump is on a bad decline now. But you could not get nominated to run for governor. You couldn't get any support from any rank and file people unless you were endorsed Donald Trump. The Jack Ciattarelli, who a few years ago called Trump some very unflattering terms, he called him a charlatan. Well, I feel that way, but I'm not running for office. So Jack had to really take up the cudgel of Donald Trump. I don't fault him for that.
No, and
that comes a big burden.
Yes. The thought is one difference this time was, the thought is to win this primary. The party has shifted so much to being the party of Donald Trump. He was running against Bill Spadea, who was a very pro-Trump candidate, that he had to do it in the primary. One thing I have heard is people were surprised he didn't shift further away from Trump until later in the general election. But there's also the thought that he needed Republicans to be on board. Yeah, you need that base. Like, it's one thing to get independents and to get soft Democrats, but if you lose that base, the whole game's over. So it was a calculation that he thought, I'll stick with Trump. And plus, also, if you go after Donald Trump, there's the chance that Trump will send off a social media message making fun of you, and then that'll cost him even more with the base.
He's doing that already.
Watch, yeah, I do not envy Republicans running in blue states while Trump is president. It's a tough tightrope to walk, and that we saw that play out.
We absolutely did see that play out. I'm going to be wondering, though, prior to next year's congressional races, New Jersey has some real barn burners. One is Tom Kean Jr. in the 7th.
Yeah.
Whom I happen to like, and his father, to me, was the greatest governor we've had. Now, he's going to have a tough time. He's going to have a tough time because his district is it's neither blue, in my view, and I'll defer to you on this. I don't think it's either blue or red. It is sort of a purple district.
Yeah, 100%.
But those are the districts where you really can have some bad damage in off-year elections, particularly because those people who vote are motivated, and you have a number of candidates who are already raising money against him. He faces a tough time. And the one thing he's going to have, and I'm not saying anything negative about him in this regard, I don't think the Republicans, Jack had several messages that were good, but it's hard to get a really compelling message in an off-year election. Or, last year's election, this year's election is considered off-year in terms of the national scope of things. But Republicans are going to have to get a really compelling message. I don't know who their advisors are going to be, but one thing that struck me, I worked in the Bush administration. I knew Karl Rove. I liked him a great deal. And I thought he was the smartest guy I ever worked for. So when Karl Rove, 3 days before the election, came out with a statement that, hey, in New Jersey, you have Mikey Sherrill. She's a terrible candidate. The Republicans are likely to win. I started celebrating. And boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
And but if Karl Rove, who was a master of message, couldn't get that concept right for this election, I wonder who's going to get it right. This is the biggest handicap I see with the Republicans. So what the hell is their message going to be?
I wrote about this. I went on vacation in August and came back and had a newsletter at the beginning of September. Basically, Labor Day's here. The race is kicking into gear. And one of the lines I had was my column was about, so what are the big questions heading into the final 2 months of the election? And my first question was, so is Mikey Sherrill the front runner? And I think one of the first lines I wrote was, it's getting harder to predict elections in one, how divisive politics have become. 2, polling seems to be a little off for many years now. 3, people, there's just a sense of that anything can happen. And I think this election, the thought was it was going to be so close that it was too close to call. And in the end, it ended up being a landslide. And that's what we didn't see coming. So that was hard to predict. So who the heck knows what's going to happen next year? And also, a year to the next midterms is eons of time. You have that, so much can change in the next, Donald Trump could do a wonderful thing that makes him popular again,
That's true.
He could, do something that caused him to lose even more popularity. So who knows? A lot can happen in the next 12 months.
With Donald Trump, it's probably going to be, he's going to do something really wonderful, but then blow it 2 weeks later.
Well, that's the thought. He
does that too. But
that was one of the things about the shutdown was that the shutdown started around the time of the Gaza peace deal. And all of us were saying what a great deal. And that was going to have a big effect on the race. It could help Jack. And in the end, the shutdown kind of overshadowed that. And
it definitely did.
Yeah. So that's a good example. Like he had one thing that everybody thought was terrific, overshadowed by another thing. And whether or not you blame whomever for the shutdown, that's not the point. The point is that the shutdown was there and people blame the person at the top.
Well, there also seems to be a civil war going on right now among Trump followers. The whole Marjorie Taylor Greene story. I mean, I don't think overnight she's turned into a great progressive or anything like that.
Yeah.
But she is typical of a lot of anger that is starting to well up against Trump. And the Epstein files is something that is not limited to blue voters or red voters. If there is any involvement with Trump in all of that, it's going to be murder for the Republicans next year.
Yeah, that was the other. Again, there's another good thing that they signed the law. He signed the law to end the shutdown, and the same day the Epstein stuff started bubbling again. Like it's kind of like, one step forward, two steps back, and so again, a lot can happen to next year. But the Epstein stuff is also going to be something to watch because it didn't really register much in this election. Cheryl tried to make a few jokes about it early on with Chitterelli, but it's not really a state issue. But this could tear apart the national parties.
Well, it definitely could. It could have that. It could have that effect of demoralizing, reducing turnout. It definitely could. We're just getting started with this thing right now. But if I was a Republican incumbent in the legislative races next year, I'd be very concerned. Put it that way.
Yeah, that was the other part of this race that was not expected. I had asked. I wasn't as paying as close attention to the legislative races as probably I should have, but every now and then I would ask a Democratic source, like, what do you think? You guys have control. Do you think it would have been a lot for Republicans to take control of the assembly? They would have had to.
That's why I never understood Jack's hopes of taking it. I said, I love you, Jack, but forget it.
So my question was more to Democrats. Like, do you think you'll lose? They lost, 7 seats the last time Jack ran, meaning Democrats. So it wasn't out of the realm of possibility for Republicans to pick up a few. So some people said, maybe we'll lose 1, maybe we'll lose 2. But that was the thought. The talk was how many are we going to lose, not how many are we going to gain.
That's right.
And so that's what's surprising here was that, they gained 5 seats and now they have, a crazy majority. And, she comes in not just with, a 14-point victory, but she comes in with 5 more Democratic seats. And, that's the other thing. But again, I will repeat, they now become the dominant, meaning the incumbent party. Like they still are the incumbent party, but like Mikey Sherrill's Democratic Party will now be the incumbents. And, you could see change next year at the state level, but who knows? Again, midterms are an interesting thing. They tend to go back and forth. It's the way it is.
Well, this is a perfect time for me to allude to the article that I just published. And the article concerns Zohran Mamdani and whether Cheryl is going to meet with him. I advocated that she not meet with him until he apologizes for one of the worst anti-Semitic remarks I ever heard anybody ever make. Because if she meets with Mamdani, it's almost like she's not an anti-Semite, but it's almost like she's condoning it if she meets with him. It's a big risk involved. But I just mentioned that because there's a lot of issues like that. She has won, but I know how it is with newly elected office holders. For example, it's hard to believe this now. She's getting phenomenal publicity now. She's a national TV star. She's on all the MS, now it's MS Now instead of MSNBC. She's on all the shows and she's good on TV. So she's getting that. And I'm not saying, even though I am not her best friend, I'm not saying this adversarially. I remember when Chris Christie was getting all that publicity. They were saying if Donald Trump wasn't running, Chris Christie would be president of the United States. So what happened? He left office with 18% popularity.
You really never know what's going to happen in politics. And Chris Christie's a fascinating case in general because he didn't run in 2012. And, I know even Nancy Reagan asked him to run in 2012, but he thought he needed he thought he needed a landslide reelection and he wasn't ready to be president. But there's all kinds of what ifs with Chris Christie. I don't know if he would have beaten Barack Obama in 2012, but, he very well, that might have made it easier for him to run again in 4 years. And maybe you never saw Donald Trump happen. There's some what ifs in politics are fascinating to look at, but it's another proof that anything can change in a short span of time.
100%. I actually think a lot of Chris Christie's decline in popularity was due to resentment of people living within New Jersey who felt that he was neglecting the state. They heard that he was running the state with a telephone. I don't know how he ever did that, by the way. I was in state government. I didn't see how a guy could run a state and do all of its business just by being on the phone. But
yeah, everybody always assumes that the reason his poll numbers dropped at the end was because of Bridgegate, and I'm sure that played a lot into it. But yeah, the thought was a lot of people were upset that he was spending so much time out of state running for president, and they didn't feel he was paying attention to New Jersey. And that's a risk you always see happen in the New Jersey governor sphere, because it's a very powerful governorship. We're a densely populated state, and you often hear people think that New Jersey is going to be a stepping stone to the presidency, and it's something I've even heard whispers about. Cheryl, in fact, I asked her.
well, that's not out of. It's by the fact that I'm not
Oh,
one for great admirers. I don't put that past like her or Slotkin
oh,
or
and yeah,
Sandberger.
you heard Murphy think about it after after he was elected. And I asked her about it. I interviewed her on Monday for the newsletter, and I asked her, I said, are you at all thinking about the presidency now? And she said, no, I got to focus on New Jersey first, which is, of course, what any candidate would say.
Well, they love when you ask that question.
Yes. And now, yeah, so that's another, or the vice presidency, maybe, she'd be considered a
I
vice
think
president.
she's a real possibility, unless she runs in. It all depends what she does as governor. This is not an easy state to govern, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to be as objective as possible. It is not an easy state to govern, and she's going to have some tough calls to make. But right now, every new president, every new governor gets a honeymoon,
Yeah.
and right now she is into that honeymoon. How long that lasts, we never know. But I think part of the reason Chris had such a good honeymoon was he exemplified the anger that Donald Trump appealed to. In that sense, people are right that the Trump candidacy really set him back in terms of running for president.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has an ability to do one thing. I don't know how he does it. He has the ability to make voters think that he's on their side when he really doesn't give a damn about them. But he has that ability. It's almost better natural. I mean, it's unbelievable. But he has that ability. But I think right now he's in a really bad decline, really bad. I think the fact that the economy hasn't prospered is hurting him. If there is real scandal in the Epstein files, he's done. I mean, he's done. But we're going to see that. But
Yeah.
I want to bring up something with you. I'm going to play some futurology. Okay. The Republicans are going to be looking for leadership. I've got three names in mind who could be future Republican presidential, gubernatorial candidates. Three names in mind. I'll tell you who they are, and I'd be interested in your reaction.
Sure.
One is a guy who I think has always been running for governor. And I think he would be a very good candidate. I tend to agree with him more than a lot of people do. That's Mike Testa Jr. I think he's one. The second one is all three of these people are my friends. I mean, I'm going to face a tough dilemma. But the second one is Holly Schapese. She is an articulate person. She's a woman, and she can get the biggest thing going for her. Well, there's a lot of good things going for her. But living in Bergen County, if she can win Bergen County, that becomes a big, big deal. And the third is not as well known as the other two, and that's Declan O'Scanlan, who is a very good legislator, and I just think he projects very well. So those are the three names I have in mind as early winner book possibilities for 2029. What do you think of the names I've mentioned?
Those are three of the names I would have on my list, especially Testa. The question is whether Testa would run for Senate next year against Cory Booker. They're going to need someone to run against Booker. I've heard a number of names thrown out there. I've heard Alina Habba is even one if you want to go with the Trump train.
Yeah, but that train's in a wreck right now.
I know. There's another one. I've heard Testa. I've heard Ed Durr would consider running, but the thought is that next year might be a sacrificial lamb type thing that'll be difficult to take down Cory Booker.
I think you just said it all. I mean, if Mike Testa foregoes a great chance to run for governor. I mean, look, even if Mikey Sherrill is wildly popular, Testa would be a competitive candidate. But I can't imagine that he would forego that opportunity to run in a U.S. Senate race that would be absolutely hopeless. I mean,
and that's why I don't think Testa might end up running for Senate, but I could see him as a gubernatorial candidate. He looks the part, very smart,
right.
charismatic.
And he's conservative enough without he doesn't come over as a cultural Trumpian, even though he's
even though he helped run Trump's 2020 campaign
yes,
here,
he did.
he also helped run Curtis Bashaw's campaign last year, which was decidedly not a pro-Trump U.S. Senate campaign.
He doesn't limit himself ideologically, which is a strength of his.
So, but Testa's a big name I heard, but I've had a lot of people. I've asked this question to a number of Republicans in recent days, and they've been like, "Well, let's get past this election first." But we still have 4 years to go, and a lot can change. We saw John Corzine come in, win as a Democrat, and then lose 4 years later to Republicans. So who knows who the next Chris Christie is?
Well, that's true, but Chris Christie's big strength was the corruption issue.
Yes.
That has always been, it's a lingering issue in New Jersey all the time. But let me ask you something about Testa, which I can't gauge. The relationship between a governor, a gubernatorial candidate, and the legislature is always the great unknown. For example, Mikey Sherrill, I'll start off with her. I don't know what her relationship is going to be with the Democrats in both the Assembly and Senate. I would think that basically Leroy Jones will push very hard to make this as good a relationship as possible. He's a very effective state chair. So I don't think she'll have a bad time. But there always is that natural resentment almost between a new governor who hasn't been in the state, who's new to state politics, and the legislature. The legislature here. I'm showing a little bit of empathy for Cheryl, which will shock the listeners of this program. But I do have empathy with her on that because I know how territorial these legislators can be.
Yeah.
I know what Whitman went through. There was so much resentment when she came into office from people in both houses of the legislature that it really at times caused her legislative agenda to bog down. So I'm wondering, what is Testa's relationship like with the legislature, as far as you know?
I think he's a very vocal legislator. He's obviously not by position a leader. Like he's not in the Assembly minority leader, Senate minority leader, or something of that nature. But no, he's a very well. You see his name on a lot of statements he's a leading voice in the party. He's definitely someone to watch.
He is an excellent legislator. He always gets ahead of the issues, and his legislation. I've read some of his bills. They're of the highest quality. But I'll be watching him. I don't know if Holly Schapese will make the race or not. I know she would like to be a gubernatorial candidate. But Declan O'Scanlan is the dark horse because, everyone likes him. He sort of works below the radar, and that's his mode. Now, on the Democrat side, I'm surprised at something. I don't know Dale Caldwell. I certainly don't know anything negative about him. But I was surprised that he was picked to run the transition. Because usually the transition is run by someone, something of a political operative. Because when you're in charge of the transition, you have to evaluate who is going to get the leading positions in state treasury, attorney general, and all the rest. And that person is usually something of an insider. I'm not saying Dale Caldwell can't do the job well, but I'm just surprised. It usually is something of a political insider, and he's not.
Yeah, one thing I've heard about the Sherrill people is that they were criticized during the campaign that they were too DC centric and didn't know New Jersey enough. They did hire Tim Lydon, who was the former executive director of the state Senate Democrats, and
he has an excellent reputation as a lawyer too.
He was one of the people that brought the inside game and helped them focus on state issues. But yeah, the question is, her new chief of staff is her campaign manager, Alex Ball, who's a DC centric person. The question is but she might not want a campaign that's considered inside Trenton. She might want to seem like kind of an outsider. I have not heard, one thing that's interesting, I've not heard much chatter about who she's going to pick in her cabinet, which is unusual. I remember when Murphy came in 8 years ago, there was all kinds of chatter about who he was going to bring in.
It usually takes about 5 days for the chatter to develop.
Yeah, like maybe we're a little early in the game yet, but who knows? I mean, maybe she's going to go with all kinds of different outside people.
But here's my question of you, because you were close to the scene. Who is her political guru? Is she her own political guru? I have no idea who that is.
Yeah, Alex Ball, who is her campaign manager, now her chief of staff, is thought to be someone who has a lot of influence in her sphere. Tim Lydon came in; he had a lot of influence on state issues, but yeah, that remains to be seen who's going to be her guru going into Trenton.
You really need that. I don't care how good or bad of a candidate you are. You really need a Trenton guru. I know that when Whitman became the governor, she didn't have a guru right off the bat. Okay, she had advisors like Hazel Gluck and other people who had been close to the Trenton scene. But over the years, she did have political gurus develop. Mike Murphy, who is a national figure but knows New Jersey very well, became a guru of hers. Mike Torpey, who was the chief of staff, he was chief counsel in her first term. He became, he's someone who knows politics very well. He became a guru. I just think that listen, I'm not an expert on Mikey Sherrill, but I just think she's going to need that. I mean, New Jersey is a really tough state.
Yeah, that's a thought. I've heard a few tried and true longtime New Jersey Democrats say that they think she needs more of a state politics presence. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yes, and we'll see how the issues develop. Now, in the legislature, John DeMeo, I really feel sorry for him. He's the leader of the Republicans who lost seats, and it wasn't his fault. He was just in a hopeless position. So it's kind of strange. He's taking some criticism as to the results, but no one wants that job. I don't think that's like a job you advertise in a newspaper or in a magazine. Hey, you can become the leader of this organization. No, thank you, not me. That strikes me as amazing.
Yeah, that's a tough job to have right now. You're at their Republicans' lowest power in decades in the assembly. But maybe the thought is maybe DeMeo, he has the experience of knowing how to fight back on the state budget. This is going to be speaking about Declan O'Scanlan. He's another one who has a lot of experience with the state budget. This is going to be a tough budget year. Going to be a tough budget year, and it's going to be next year is going to be tough. The following year is going to be tough too. So maybe it's a very budget centric thing. DeMeo is known as a budget person. So maybe that's their focus, that they think that the way to get back is to fight back on the state budget.
Well, it usually is, actually. Look, these elections are really, to use the phrase, economic centered. When Jim Florio was defeated for re-election in 1993, it was all a question of the tax hike. Money and taxation and the economy are always the big three, so to speak, in New Jersey politics. But again, we don't know what this economy is going to be. We don't know what Donald Trump's policy is going to be. I thought his tariff policy was stupid. But so all of a sudden I see that he's giving up on these tariffs, and he comes up with very interesting explanations as to why. So, boy, next year is a real coin flip.
Yeah. It's going to be a fascinating it's going to be a really fascinating election next year, just in general. I mean, this was a fascinating race. None of us really, the contours were difficult to understand, and in hindsight, we probably should have been paying attention to some other things. And I will repeat, the risk of repeating myself. A lot can change in the next few months, but maybe politics has just gotten to the point where they're so divisive that we flip back and forth all the time. And so maybe there's a thought next year will be another Democratic year, but who knows?
Well, have you talked to any pollsters since the election? A lot of these guys are my friends, and I'm not going to go out and criticize them, but some of the very best pollsters I know missed this outcome completely.
Yeah, and it's been a tough decade for polls. But again, polling has become so unusual in the Trump era because politics have become so unusual in the Trump era. Some people may lie to pollsters. There's also, so many things politics are so nationalized and changed so much in a dime. Maybe it's hard to capture the mood. Maybe the mood's already changed by the time
I think it's also, you can't reach everyone anymore because polling was designed under people who had landline phones. Cell phones right now block restricted phone. You cannot get an accurate poll at this point. It's impossible. I mean, look at how people are accessed, and anyway, it's impossible.
Yeah. Well, that's true. But Yoni, let me ask you this: some years they are successful with reaching people by phone. Like in last year, the pollsters did a really good job. They had the same kind of conditions. What makes you think? I'm not saying you're wrong, but what makes you think that this was a tougher year to access individuals, reach individuals?
I'll disagree. I don't think they were accurate at all for the for last year. We're talking 2024. They blew it.
No, but 2024, the pollsters seemed to get it right. They didn't get it right this year.
I mean, I think they've been it's hit or miss. I think in New Jersey, especially amongst my generation, you're not going to get people picking it up. You're not going to reach people. I know many people who dropped the landline. I just don't think people are accessible anymore. And each year, more and more people don't want to be called. They don't want to sit in the
Well,
phone.
that's true.
Like it's
Well,
very
there's
challenging.
another factor. There's what I have heard called the social factor. There are people who, if they're asked by pollsters who they're going to vote for, they don't want to admit they're voting for Trump because they think that voting for Trump, if someone finds out about it, they're going to suffer a little bit of social distancing. I believe that. I know people who said to me, I'm going to vote for him in past elections, and but I don't want to admit it to anybody. There's a lot of that out there, But I think now, I mean, look, he does not look well. His health looks terrible. He also he has a habit of lying too damn much. I mean, how long can you blame Joe Biden for the problems you're having with inflation? I mean, this is constant day by day by day, and I
And
see his numbers going way through the floor.
and I think people are over vengeful politics. It's one thing to go after in a healthy manner, but to be using the DOJ as your attack dog to try to deflect, I think
Well,
people are
that's a
seeing past.
moral and ethical wrong.
Yeah, I think people are seeing past that now and really saying, like, dude, get your stuff together.
Well, I think that's true, but that's a moral and ethical problem. But let me go back to Brent. Okay, since we're getting some good gossip on here tonight, let's talk. Have you heard any names, for example, mentioned for Attorney General?
No, and I'm actually surprised at that. That's the biggest question is who's going to be her AG. I know some people speculate, oh, maybe she'll keep Matt Placken. I have
I
not.
doubt it.
Yeah, I have not heard that is going to be the case. I think Placken's going to look into.
I'm not opposed to that, but I just doubt it. I mean,
Yeah,
usually. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't know. That's a great question. This is actually one of the things I was planning on looking into this week. I was going to make some phone calls to see who might be in her cabinet. AG is obviously one always people look towards. Secretary of Education, Treasurer. Those are the big ones.
The Treasurer is the big one. And I'll tell you why I say that. We have a lieutenant governor now, but the lieutenant governor is really not exercising any power. They set up the statute where he or she will become the secretary of the department. And that could be a big deal depending what department it is. For example, Sheila Oliver became the late Sheila Oliver, rest in peace, became the head of the Department of Community Affairs. That's a big one. DCA really is in charge of the budget for all the municipalities in the state.
Yeah.
And a lot of the regulatory habits. So she was smart. She really played that very, very well. And at the same time, when Kim Guadagno came in, she was a very able woman. But Christie, I don't think he wanted any competition, so he stuck her over at the Department of State, and she managed to make that a good job. She got involved as a ombudsman and helping communities with their state government problems. But we don't have a clue yet. This is already a week. I'm not saying this in a negative way either. In a way, I give her credit that she's running a pretty leak-proof operation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I thought I would know more by now, and it's not even just me. It's if you look at the insidery websites, like Globe and Insider NJ, there hasn't been. Maybe that changes this week. This could be the week where all this changes. But so the whisper can't, because it's been more about the last week has been less about the future and more about what happened. How did this election break down the way it did? So maybe we'll start to hear more of it this week.
Well, also, I think if people stop just saying they're running for her seat,
yeah,
it also helps. I mean,
it seems like
who's not running?
Yeah, exactly. If you live in the 11th district, you automatically run now. That's how it seems to be. So,
well, yeah, that's true. But I'll tell you that we'll conclude this show with the congressional races. Tom Kean is really under challenge. Can he succeed and win again? I think he can, but he's going to have to really work for it. The other seats, in Mikey Sherrill's district, the 11th, I think that's going to be a Democrat. I think that Bonnie Watson Coleman, that's going to be a Republican. But there's going to be a lot of money put into that primary because Bonnie Watson Coleman did not have a good record on Israel at all. And the AIPAC and organizations like that fund congressional races having Israel in mind, they're going to put a lot of money into that primary. That is one prediction I'll make, and I can bank on it. Okay. But between the 11th, the 12th, and the 7th, Brent, I think they're going to have you working on congressional races starting this week.
Yeah, I think it'll be soon. It'll be those will be the Kane race. There's even the thought Republicans might have a shot at taking down Nellie Poe.
I was just going to say Nellie Poe. I think I'd be worried if I were her.
Yeah, that's
but I think she'll win.
Yeah, and then there's also one to watch is the primary in the 12th district to replace Bonnie Watson Coleman. That won't be a general election one, but which Democrat's going to take her seat. So there's a lot to watch next year.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said?
A lot to watch next year. New Jersey. One of the things about the way, because we have off-year elections, there's always a race to watch in New Jersey every year.
And that's why we love Jersey politics. But
yes, exactly.
Having said what you just said, the one seat could make a difference for the whole country.
Yes,
the Democrats want to win back control of the House and Senate. And so if Tom Kean loses, and he's had some close races before, Tom Kean Jr., the loss of that seat can be an enormous factor in the Democrats getting control of the Congress, and we could have that. We could have that happen. A final note, and by the way, I look forward to having Brent, as FDR used to say, again and again and again. You really add a lot to this broadcast. Brent and I have something in mind. We're baseball fans, and I'm going to be doing some articles on this, and I'm going to bug Brent to get involved. Sure. I think it's long overdue for Don Newcomb, who was on the Brooklyn Dodgers, who were venerated by Brent's grandfather, venerated by me. That was the first favorite team I had. It's long overdue for him to be in the Hall of Fame. He's the first guy that was able to win rookie of 3 big awards, Rookie of the Year in his first year, of course. He later won the first Cy Young Award in 1956. And he also, in that same year, won Most Valuable Player. And being African-American, he ran into a lot of tough obstacles. So you're going to see me running a side campaign, and I'm going to bug Brent on this for Don Newcomb to be in the Hall of Fame.
And I think you and I noted this week over text that he lived in Rahway. And
yes, he did.
My dad told me a story this week as I brought up the Don Newcomb thing, because his father was a Dodger fan.
Oh, we got to get your dad on the show sometime.
Yeah, my dad told me that my great-grandfather, his mother's father, Lovas was their name. They ran an awning company in Rahway, and for some reason, Don Newcomb needed to buy an awning, and Don Newcomb came into their shop in Rahway and bought an awning. So there's that family connection that Don Newcomb is friends of the Johnson family somewhere along the line.
Oh, that's a great one. We have to have them come in. It's like my family story about the day my father was born, October 7, 1925.
Yeah.
My grandfather was at the first game of the World Series between the Pirates and the Washington Senators. That was the first World Series where a team that was down 3-1, the Senators came back and won the series. And when he got home from the series, he was at game 1. He asked, "Where's Rose?" He asked his mother-in-law, "Where's Rose?" And they said, "She's at the hospital. You have a new son." So baseball family stories are welcome on this show.
It is the great American cultural equalizer, baseball, meaning it kind of mirrors American history, baseball. So
it really does. And I'll tell you, it was a wonderful diversion for me this year. I got the same package of tickets. I got 20 seats. I have the weekday package because weekends I would be conflicting with the Jewish Sabbath, but it worked out really well for me. And I needed that diversion. I told people with all the tensions with the elections, with politics, with my concerns about, public safety here, concerns about Israel over there. It was a great diversion for me. And that's something that baseball really has. So this is officially a baseball show. Yoni, if you want to wear a team's cap, well, you're welcome to do it. What do you wear? You root for the Phillies?
Yeah, I'm not, I'll admit, I'm not the biggest baseball fan. I'm definitely more football, basketball.
Right.
I just think the baseball takes too long. Don't got patience
Well,
for it.
bring your daughter in to wear the cap.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Well, that concludes
I
the
think our
broadcast.
listeners will be excited for us to get back to away from politics for a little bit.
Oh yeah, but they need a diversion too.
Yeah.
But this has been a great show, and Yoni, the production is top flight as always. And Brent, to have you on this show is an honor. You are
Pleasure.
one of the great young stars of New Jersey politics, and to partake of your wisdom every week is something we value. That
My pleasure.
concludes this show. I'm Alan Steinberg, the voice of Dynamic Political Centrism. And if you follow New Jersey politics, Michael Aaron, the late great Michael Aaron, used to say, "It will never let you down." So, folks, it's post-election time now. Have a great week, and get ready to have turkey next week, and enjoy it.
Yes. Happy
That's all
Thanksgiving.
What's that?
Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving. Happy gobble gobble. And as I said, I turned 76 on Saturday, so I'm going to be praying for the spirit of 76.
Yes. Happy birthday, Alan.
That's happy birthday, Alan.
Thank you, my friends. That's it. Have a great week.
Thank you for joining us for the latest edition of Dynamic Political Centrism. Check back each week for our newest episodes, and you can catch past episodes online via YouTube and Spotify, and please subscribe to our Substack.